All right. Good afternoon to those of you on the East Coast. Good afternoon also to those of you on the West Coast. I'm your host, Brandon Troy, also co-creator of Movers and Shakers Unlimited. Thanks so much for joining us wherever you're watching from. As you will know, this today we are actually going through some anniversaries, and we you just enjoyed an anniversary that we did just moments ago, but we will dive into another one that we will discuss today. And in talking about this said film, let me see if I can get it up for you guys now. Is none other than Remember the Titans. Just to give you some background info on that said film, it was released in September of 2000, September 29th, 2000 to be exact. So we are a little early, but we are still within that year of our 25th anniversary. It's hard to believe. But just to get the into the background of the said film, it is based on a true story and follows what transpired in the early 70s when we're talking about uh, two two schools that one black school and one white school that was integrated, and due to that integration, what transpired with their football team and the the tensions that ensue, not just among the school but also among the team, of them trying to resolve their differences and to come together as a team. And I won't be alone in talking about this said film. The guests that I have on, I've been trying to get on for a while, so I'm super excited to have them joining us. They were born and raised in Des Moines, and briefly served as a combat engineer and journalist in the U.S. Marine Corps. However, by 1978, not too long after, will become a member of the renowned Penumbra Theater Company in St. Paul, Minnesota. Of course, since that time, they have continued to appear regularly in film and in television in projects such as Baywatch, Baywatch Nights, Hidden Figures, and The Righteous Gemstones, just to name a few, over that said career. And recently, in the last few years, that has extended on to becoming a producer, a writer, and a director as well. It's my pleasure to welcome onto the show Gregory Allen Williams. Get him on now.
Brandon, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm good,
Good,
sir.
good.
Great to have you on. Like I said, it has been a journey, reaching out and making sure that we could, get this schedule. So I'm glad to have you on.
Good to be
Um,
here. Yeah.
so I'll start first by, can you talk just about the film itself and how you got involved? Because I know a lot of times when we're talking about these films, as I mentioned before, film based on a true story, that there are always are interesting aspects to that in terms of what they're having elements that are true to the story, and then of course elements that are added for dramatic license. So
Mhm.
I'll give you the floor, if you could share how you came aboard it.
Well, at the time, I had completed a series called Baywatch.
Of course.
About
Just
yeah,
a little
I
show
want to
called
say about
Baywatch.
about 4 years before, but I wasn't living in L.A. I was on
Okay.
sabbatical. I was teaching in Middle Georgia at a Head Start program, and
Okay.
I got a call from an agent in Atlanta. I mean, I wasn't really acting at that time, and asking me to come and audition for a much smaller role in Remember the Titans. So I went and I auditioned, and it happened to be the casting director was L.A. based and knew me and said, "Where you been?" I said, "Well, I've been." Yeah, it took a couple of years off to teach, and then she asked me to read for a much bigger role, and I won the role.
Absolutely, absolutely, and the rest is history, as they say. So,
Yeah.
and talking about that too, because as I mentioned just a moment ago, there were characters that were not a part of that initial story, and that wasn't the case with yours. So, in speaking to that, Can you talk a bit about that research that went into doing that? Because it's always, I feel like it can be tricky when you're dealing with a story where it is a real life person versus someone who is fictional, because you want to do them right, you want to do them justice, you don't want to disappoint in being able to adapt that real life person.
Well, I had the honor of playing Coach Paul Doc Hines, and what was great. This was the first film. I think it was the first film I'd ever done um, where I was portraying a character, a historical character, a contemporary character, who was still living.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and so I had a chance to meet Doc. I had a chance to meet his kids, and he and Coach Boone, Denzel's character, had been coaching. We're still coaching. I think I think Doc had retired maybe a year or two before the film was made, but Coach Boone was still coaching. So it was exciting.
Awesome. Awesome. And diving deeper into that, can you talk a bit about what was necessary to make sure that it was authentic? As you said, you met him. Uh, I'm assuming that there were camps that were involved in terms of being authentic to not just the sport, but at least also to perhaps his mannerisms and what how he approached, that the game of football and that type of thing. So
Hmm.
is
Well,
there
well,
go ahead.
you know, when you're portraying a character who is not well known, and until this movie was made, Doc Hines and Coach Boone were not well known. So I didn't have to focus so much on mannerisms and things. In other words, you have to do that when you're portraying a character that lots of people are familiar with, and familiar with their mannerisms and the speech pattern. So I didn't have to work with that too much. I was really interested in the philosophy and in his relationship with Coach Boone. It was really, for me, was about the relationship between these two men. Also, for me, when I first read the script, I thought that this movie was set in the mid 60s. Because, see, I graduated from high school in 1973. So what freaked me out was that this
It
sort of
wasn't that
madness
far
was
off.
still,
Yeah.
excuse me, this sort of madness was still going on in the early 70s. You know,
Right. Right.
I'm like,
Right.
whoa, really? And a funny anecdote was that, so this was also the first film I was in that was portraying my life and times as sort of a historical thing. So that was kind of,
That must have been crazy, I'm
that
sure.
was great. It was odd. I'll tell you a very quick funny story.
Yeah,
Is
sure.
that,
Go ahead.
many of the actors were wearing naturals, short froze, right? And so they didn't know how to comb them. They didn't know how to pick them, right? So one day they was like doing something. I was like, no, you know what I mean? You gotta take your picking. So that was sort of funny.
Awesome, awesome. And I wanted to also and see if there was any truth to this. I understand that with your filmmaker wasn't particularly well versed, I understand, in the game of football. So I'm sure that provided an interesting dynamic in doing this film that's supposed to be about this said sport. So
Well,
are you able?
well, well, Mr. Washington at the time was
Yes.
coaching Pop Warner ball, and so many of those plays that you see were choreographed by Mr. Washington.
All right, there you go. There you go. There you go. But no, I just know, yeah, I was just gonna say, I understand that there was, I guess, a whole like boot camp that your filmmaker had to do in order to kind of be versed in
Yeah,
the game.
yeah,
So
but Denzel often weighed in
got it,
on the plays.
got it, got it, got it. And a lot of times when we're talking about films like these where we're playing sports or anything that's physical, right? That there
Hmm.
are going to be things, no matter how well choreographed they are, no matter how rehearsed they are, things happen. What was there in talking about s- playing this sport and having it realized on the screen? Were there moments that you recall where things didn't plan out as planned, but perhaps if you recall, the take was still kept? of things that happen when it comes to like some of those scenes, those
You know,
football
I'm
scenes?
sure there were, but you know what? I'm be honest with you. It was so cold. You see, we shot that film in the fall,
Okay.
in late fall in Georgia,
Ooh,
and it's
okay.
very
Yes.
cold as it is
Yes.
now.
Yes.
And we shot very late because we were actually shooting at high school fields. So we sometimes our day wouldn't even begin until 6 p.m.
Mm,
and we'd be doing 10 or 12-hour days.
okay.
So those players would be running plays at 1, 2 o'clock in the morning.
Sure.
And it was real cold. And I'll be honest with you, I was really focused on my lines and staying warm. I mean, I was wearing several layers because it was bad. It was cold. So what what was going on in the field was not in my lane. So I stayed in my lane, which was making sure my lines were spoken correctly and that I was kind of warm.
Sure, sure. Well. Speaking of that, aside the action scenes aside, if we're talking about some of the other scenes, because I watched it again and recently, just in preparation of this, because I've seen it a number of times, but recently it's been a while. And one thing that I had forgotten about was the that sequence about football being fun. So, if you could talk a bit, because talk a bit about that sequence and remembering being there on that day, because it is a funny scene, but it seems it comes across so naturally. So I'm just curious if there was a level of improvisation that was encouraged during that moment, because it is a very funny scene with Faison, with Donald Faison, in which he
Mm-hmm.
has that interaction with Denzel,
Mm-hmm.
and how they play off one another, and him, you like, what are you smiling at? What's so funny? What are you smiling at? And him going back and forth with like, oh yeah, football is funny. He's like, and then he brings it back around of talking about how serious they're going to, their practice is going to be, and then bringing it back to him of, yeah, this practice is going to be fun. So, do you recall, any moments from of that day when you got shot that?
Well, absolutely, in lots of moments. You know, Mr. Washington, he's a collaborative actor. He's a collaborative star, collaborative lead actor. And he likes to have fun and he likes to play. So, sometimes he would depart from the script.
Okay.
Uh, um, and so on that particular day, right, that was absolutely, they were both feeling that and absolutely improvisational to a significant degree. There was another moment. I don't there was a moment in the movie where one of the opposing coaches refers to the team, the TC Williams team, as
Yeah.
monkeys.
Oh, and the banana.
That was not the banana was not scripted.
Oh wow. Okay. That's great. Because I do. Yes. 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 Awesome. Awesome.
So Mr. Washington is a very playful actor, but he's also very precise. And I'll give you an example. On 2 or 3 occasions, because in any time you shoot a film, the film is always evolving.
Hmm.
So there are new pages. So there'll be rewrites during the
Sure.
course of the film when you're shooting the film. You know how it works.
Sure.
And so on a couple of occasions, we would get a rewrite of a scene. And Mr. Washington would read it. And he'd ask his assistant to go to his trailer and get previous versions.
Mm.
And he had binders of the previous versions of the script going all the way back to the original version.
Wow.
And he had already done his research, and he would, let's say, go to the sixth or seventh revision and say, I think it was written better
In this
back
prior.
here.
Wow. Wow. Okay.
So he's
Wow.
playful, he's
Wow.
improvisational, but he's very precise.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, the other thing that I wanted to be able to dive into, and I had a chance to dive into this in the previous anniversary show that I had a little earlier. And I think this is actually plays into the special sauce, if you will, when we're talking about
Mm-hmm.
films that have anniversaries and this your ensembles, because even before and talk in the show before of talking about folks that are a part of the ensemble, the same could be said here of folks that at the time, they were still on their way, but they would go on to do other things. And I mean, I could go down the list. I mean, outside of yourself, outside of Denzel Washington, outside of, I mean, you guys already were, established and continuing to do, great things. But we had what I mean, you also have Will Patton in there. You have, if I'm talking about Ron Hurst, would go on to do Walking Dead and all these other things. You have Wood Harris, you have Donald Faison, who I already mentioned, Hayden Panettiere, you have Kate Bosworth, Ron Gosling. I mean, I could keep going down this list. It's like insane because uh, under today's circumstances, as I mentioned, even in our other show, this would be like impossible to be able to pull off in terms of the amount of talent of trying to amass them together in one film. So, can you talk a bit about that and being in that space of witnessing a lot of these folks that they weren't quite there yet, but you could tell that they were on their way.
Well, and I don't know that you could even tell. I
Okay.
mean, this thing's a crapshoot.
Sure.
Who will, who won't,
Yeah.
and how high will the rise be?
Yeah.
Um, Hayden, of course, was just a little girl.
Yeah.
So who knew?
Hmm.
Ryan Gosling would bring his guitar to set every day. He'd be sitting on the steps of his trailer, and he'd just be playing and just a singing. You know what I'm saying? Just
Yeah. Yeah.
a sweet young man, just a nice man. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Nice to everyone, always a smile on his face. Um, and Mr. Hurst.
Yeah.
I remember seeing him, I think, in Saving Private Ryan, and
Yeah.
I was like, you know what I'm saying? Um, Look, you never know, but I think that speaks to casting.
Yeah.
You had an ensemble of really good young actors, and I'm not surprised um, that so many of them, rose to be recognized throughout the industry and through many audiences
Yeah.
at all. Um, it's a great movie. It's an inspiring movie. I mean, you can only imagine the people that I've met whose football coach made them watch Remember the Titans at the
Right.
top of
Yeah.
every season.
Yeah.
I mean, it crossed political lines and social lines and ethnic lines and all of that, right? So this was definitely a film that brought us together as a nation.
Absolutely. And I was gonna say, and commenting back on you talking about just when you are among colleagues, sometimes it can be a crapshoot of where things could go in terms of their careers. Now that, as I mentioned at the top,
Mhm.
you have, even though you still act, you have added other hats to your repertoire, if you will, in the last couple of years with directing and producing and all of that. So has that provided an interesting lens for you now, um, when we're talking about amassing the right ensemble for your projects?
Unquestionably, unquestionably. In fact, I'm about to do a Q&A with about 50 actors to talk specifically about this casting process. From a director's perspective, it's
Sure.
about 6 features that I've directed now, and I've also produced some of those and written 3 of them.
Yeah.
So it's a wonderful lens. It provides a wonderful insight for me as an actor. And there's certain things that I've always known or that I've suspected that prove true. but then a
Sure.
treasure trove of other things that I discovered, you know, in that casting process. You know, I just directed 2 films over the past 60 days. Um, and some of the actors in those films studied with me some years ago.
Oh, okay.
Um, and I was just blown away by their performances. And I knew I would be, because, you know, I cast people who were right for the role, and I cast really, really, really good actors, you know, who were committed to the work that was in front of them.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I feel like that's a great segue in talking about, you were just saying the impact of this film and talking about what it stands for. A lot of times when, as an artist, right, as an actor, as a filmmaker, writer, you want your whatever you worked on to have an impact and to stand the test of time, and you wouldn't be here otherwise, right? The 25th
Mhm.
anniversary. So can you share a little bit about that, what you feel it is for you? I know you've teased or talked about them briefly, of what those said things are, but maybe there's some other like universal things that you feel with this film that it has had the longevity, that it has.
You know, it ultimately, the film is a mirror that, at the end of the day, shows us our better selves,
Yeah,
the better angels of of our nature. And as a nation, we long to see that. We love to see that. As much as people say we're at each other's throats, the truth is we all kind of want the same things.
yeah.
We want to see our kids be
Underneath it
okay
all, we all,
underneath it all.
yeah,
And remember, and you know, the football field is, boy, it's a crucible. And the football field, you know, football players have this camaraderie
absolutely.
and this understanding of the importance of team and working together and accomplishing goals together. And it's been that way. Athletics have been sort of that thing for us for a long time. So I'm not surprised that Remember the Titans has really found a place in lots of Americans' hearts, you know, from all different walks of life. And I was and am thrilled to be a part of it. Absolutely.
Awesome, awesome. Well, a lot of times when I do these anniversary shows, Mr. Williams, is going into reflection of the things perhaps that you are most proud of, and perhaps even those things that you wish you could do over, or maybe it could be something not necessarily that you regret, but wish that you had another shot at, or that you had the opportunity to do. So, with that being said, could you, and you could do it in whatever order you like, whether
Mm-hmm.
it's what you're most proud of or what you would do differently, when it comes to this film, and reflecting on being a part of this film.
Well, certainly, you know, Remember the Titans is you know, one of those projects that's at the top of the list for me of you know, having been a part of. It's a classic.
Yeah, yeah,
And I come from a time when most of the time when you saw African American actors, you saw them as butlers and maids, and
or
you know,
slaves.
and slaves and janitors and all
Yeah.
that sort of thing. When I was coming up as a kid, there were 2 black people on TV, 2 black men. You
Well,
know, I mean,
I would say in my era as thugs or drug dealers. So
exactly. So to
yeah,
be a part of this of the classic American movie that is about America and a time in America and growth in America was really great. Um, as far you know, what would I do differently? Um, you know, that's a really good question. It's hard for me to say what would I do. I mean, there are personal things that I would do differently, but professional things that I would do differently.
I would say like just maybe not necessarily something that you were
Hmm.
like regret, but maybe
Hmm.
there was something that there was an opportunity to do and you just didn't do it for whatever reason, or maybe a choice that you made, like
Hmm.
if we're talking performance wise, you're like, oh, like I look back on it now and I mean I love the performance, but I would have done this. Maybe not, but it's always, fascinating to reflect and look back.
I think always when you see your work, there's a thought
Because you're a
at
different
one
actor
moment
now
or
than you were then. So
right. There's a thought that, but here's the bottom line. What I
yeah.
do is when I watch, there's one litmus test for me, and that is, do I believe that I am the person I'm pretending to be? I know that it is not real. I know that it's acting. But if I believe it, if I buy the story, and if I buy that character, that's all. That's, I've done what I'm supposed to do. Is to make the audience believe that I am who I'm pretending to be. And so if I believe it, yeah, then I know. I'll tell you one thing. There
Okay.
is one thing. There was a film that Ving Rhames and I were up for. And
Okay.
I wish, if I could go back, I wish I understood some things about Hollywood at that time.
Okay.
I always believed and was sort of taught that um, in order to succeed as an actor, you needed to have great range. You need to be able to play a variety of characters and speak in a number of different ways. One of the things Ving Rhames and other actors of my younger era understood was that at that time, Hollywood wanted truly authentic African Americans. They didn't want African Americans who were deluded. They didn't want portrayals that were homogenized. They didn't want that. When they cast, I don't care if the brother was a doctor or a lawyer or what he was. They wanted that cat to be that cat, and that wasn't something I understood at all. And there were other actors of my younger era who understood that even if they were casting you in a white collar role, for example, they still wanted that black swag. You know what I mean? They didn't
Yeah.
necessarily
Yeah. Yeah.
want the King James English or
Right.
whatever. And
Yeah.
that was
Yeah.
something that it took me a long time to understand, because Hollywood is one of the most racist institutions on the planet, one of the most racist communities on the planet. And that was something I didn't understand, and that they very much wanted me to, even if I was playing an elevated character, they still wanted me to be that cat from the hood. In fact, I had a director ask me one time in an audition, "Do you really
And this
talk
was
like that?"
recently, or are you saying back then?
Oh, no, no. This is. I'm gonna say. You know what? 20 years ago.
Okay.
I'm
Okay.
gonna say, yeah, 20 years ago. I had a director actually say to me, "Do you really talk like that?"
Oh
Because I
wow.
think I was reading for a role of a biology professor.
Yeah.
So my enunciation, I wasn't over enunciating. My enunciation was on point.
Right.
But that wasn't what he wanted. You see, he wanted a biology professor who was like that, and I can do that.
Right.
But that's what he wanted. And he
Wow.
asked me, "Do you really talk like that?"
Wow.
Oh, we won't even get into that, it, but look, every actor of color of my era,
Yeah.
every African American actor of even Asian actors, Asian American actors, and I've had had lunch with a group of Asian American actors who were doing an episode of Baywatch, and
Hmm.
of course it was a kung fu episode. And we were all laughing because most of them were saying, "Man, I don't know nothing about the martial
Right.
art." But
Exactly.
when I became an actor, my agent
I
told me,
had
"You better
said
go
that
and
you
get
have to
this
learn it or do it.
skill,
Yeah. That's
or
yeah.
you're gonna miss some paydays."
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, with that being said, thank you, Mr. Williams, so much for hopping on and going down memory lane
Absolutely.
of 25 years of Remember the Titans. It's crazy to believe. I remember like yesterday when I saw it in theaters, so it's wild to believe that it's been 25 years. Um, But can you tell folks before I let you go where they can find you? Congratulations, by the way, with the Righteous Gemstones. I know you
Thank you.
guys just wrapped, if memory
Season
serves.
4, yeah.
Yep. So,
Yeah.
but other than that, can you tell folks where they can find you?
Well, I'm Greg Allen 101 on Instagram, and I have a feature that's been out for about a year called Reunion.
Of course.
Um,
Won a
on
DC Film Fest, Black Film Fest
Absolutely.
award. There you go.
And it's on Prime and Apple, and yes, I know I shouldn't say it, but Tubi. Yes, it's there too. And then we have two new films. We have a film called Crazy, another thriller, and then a family comedy called Paw Paw and Deja. And both of those films are in post production right now, and you should be seeing them later this year.
All right, awesome. Well, there you guys have it. I want to thank Gregory Allen Williams for coming on and talking 25 years of Remember the Titans. I'm your host, Brandon Choi, host and co-creator of Movers and Shakers Unlimited. Thanks so much for joining us wherever you guys are watching from. And till next time, guys, see you later.
Take care.